Cool. Hello, Albany. Yeah, who here was here for last year? Yeah? Anybody see my talk last year? Oh, cool. Welcome back. Today we're just really going to be focused on content discovery. Basically, like, how do you identify what is available in a web app to attack? What you should spend your time on? We're going to be using Burp Suite. Now, it doesn't look like all of my slides is fitting on the projector here.
There's more on top.
There's more on bottom.
There's more on the bottom.
Yeah. Not much more on the bottom, but that could... I'm afraid to push the button. Let's see. What if I push this one?
Oh shit. There it is. Oh, it just it all went gone.
Okay, I'm going to unplug my battery.
It's all upstairs. It's open upstairs now. You guys can go crank.
Okay.
You go check.
Well, so it wasn't fitting on the screen, so I pushed the button here.
Should come back.
You see it on your screen again? Okay, so you can see this bottom section here isn't appearing on the overview. So there's going to be more content that's not appearing on the overview also. Yeah, I mean, you can do whatever you want. And these are the display options, but every time I click one, it screws everything up. Okay, that's fine. Well, you know what? We're gonna make do with what we got here. See if I can make this window behave differently.
Minimize the page.
You do see the problem.
Well, don't listen.
Yeah, we're viewing it.
I don't know why.
Okay, that's going to be good enough. We're going to roll with that. Okay, so yeah. Anyways, some links in my name. That's really all you missed so far. Moving forward. This is really where I got the inspiration for a lot of this stuff. If you've never read the Web Application Hacker's Handbook, highly recommend it. It's got 21 chapters exactly. The last chapter is really a walkthrough of penetration testing for web application. There's a whole chapter for cross-site scripting, for SQL injection. I'm right now talking primarily about chapter 4. And I'm not going to be going into as much depth as they do. This is just kind of a brief overview. I'm going to try and include a little bit of hands-on at the end. But the dude who wrote it is the same dude who made Burp Suite. So if you really want to get into web application testing, highly recommend this book. There's a link here down at the bottom, but you obviously can't click it. I'm a web application developer by trade. I've been doing it for a while, over half as long as I've been alive. I make enterprise applications now for really security-conscious companies, and I also help companies test their web application security as a hobby. If you're interested, the company that I'm currently contracted for full-time has lots of 100% remote telecommuting opportunities for people who want to work corp to corp, live wherever you want, tax benefits, lots of fun projects, clever tech, check it out. But today we're primarily going to be talking about how to audit the attack surface of a website. And we're going to be focusing on kind of an overview of what's available, what's intended to be available, what is hidden, how you can find that hidden stuff, and how you can kind of make a nice little guide for yourself when you get into the later phases of actually trying to exploit this stuff. So some of the stuff that we're interested in is like input vectors, the session state management, what technologies are being deployed on the application. All of these things can help you plan out your injection attacks and that kind of stuff. So once we get a general map of what's there and take notes on the technologies, etc., we can start really analyzing it and planning out our attack. And there will be hands-on at the end, so bear with me while I fiddle around with Burp Suite in front of you guys and give you a taste of what's actually involved in using some of this stuff. Last year, the application I tested was Utilidae. There's other ones, Dan Vulnerable Web Application, DBWA, WebGo. This time we're going to be using Juice Shop, which is a new OWASP project, which is pretty cool. We'll talk more about that in a second. When you're mapping an application, you're really just trying to figure out what's there, right? What are the paths, the functionality that you're interested, the functionality that's available, the the URL structure, trying to get whatever you can identified about the application so that you can predict behavior that might exist that wasn't intentional, that you can then use to exploit, to access restricted content, that kind of stuff. But who here does not know the OWASP top 10? I have at least a couple of hands. So I have my little cheat sheet here. But let's see if we can get some shout outs. What are some of the top 10 vulnerabilities in a web application?
Insecure API.
Insecure API. So insecure API might fall under different categories, right? There's sensitive data that could be exposed from an API. There's broken authentication, broken access control, SQL, no SQL injections. Any others?
Insufficient logging.
Insufficient logging, that's interesting too, because that's a new one in 2017. Some of the most recent attacks that they found have been like, the exploit has been there for like 200 days, right? People didn't know that it was there. It was a third party that's like, oh, guys, you're leaking data on the internet, right? So that's new. That's a new top 10. Some of the other ones, like known vulnerable components, hey, you're still on PHP 4, right? Like, there's other ones too, XML, right? XML, external entity references, cross-site scripting, security misconfiguration. But the really fun ones, in my opinion, are injection attacks. So we'll take a look at a few of them. We're not going to go in depth like I did before. This link here is basically my old talk. You can Google ANYCon hacking with Burp and find my old talk where I kind of give a demo of lots of the different kinds of attacks. But this is focusing specifically on mapping functionality. Now, any guesses why we would focus on functional mapping as opposed to URL mapping? So one of the things that you run across is the URLs don't necessarily always reflect the content of the page. For example, we're going to have index.php, page equals 10. You'll see another example at the end where there's front-end routing that doesn't actually have a back-end route component attached to it. So that won't show up in your sitemap. So you really want to say, okay, these are the names of the pages in a human readable form. These are what they do. These are the inputs that are attached to them to give you kind of an overview of what you can attack outside of just the sitemap, right? The sitemap is great. It gives you a visual. And we'll talk about what a sitemap is. You'll see an example of it. But I like to kind of take notes in a program called KeepNote. And I'll show you KeepNote too. It's like a notebook for your computer. You can put images in there, files, you can categorize things with child pages. It's neat. You can also make a visual diagram of it if you need to communicate this to other people. But that can be kind of tedious and sometimes you just don't have the time. The general approach, the general path through a web application when you're just taking a look at it and like clicking around, like that's how it's supposed to be used. That's like the best case scenario or the happy path, right? What can we see without actually trying to exploit anything? And once we really get a feel for that, then we can start predicting what could come next. There's lots of opportunities for things to be exposed that aren't intended to be exposed. My favorite, of course, in my opinion, is backup files, right? Because you're editing a file on the server and now you get little Emacs spoofs, or like Vim swap files, or maybe you've made a backup file that contains all of your source code and you can just download it by navigating to it. A lot of this stuff, though, you have to guess out. So rather than typing it all in, there's tools inside of Burp that we can use to help us guess some of this stuff. A lot of the functionality that you see that the sitemap picks up on, or that automated scanners will pick up on, or passive spiders when you're clicking around, doesn't include certain elements on the page that are commented out or disabled, right? So sometimes you have to look at the source code. And actually, Burp provides a really neat tool to help you with that as well. We'll talk about that more. Sometimes you can also trigger the mobile site, and it uses a different API. Lots of interesting things. And really, when you see the API calls, then you start to get a feel for, okay, this is the format of the content that the application accepts. This is, it's taking in JSON, or it's using query parameters, or it has this data parameter with base64 encoded strings, or there tends to be a flow that the developer follows across the site. So when you start mapping out, okay, now we have this REST endpoint where users ID 1 has friends, right? So does that respond to different request types, right? If you're getting it, can you post to it? Can you put to it? Can you patch it? So that kind of gives you an idea of what could be there. But you can also mess around with your headers, right? Sometimes you can change a cookie and it triggers different behaviors. Or you can change your forwarded for address and do some sort of injection attack on their logging system. File uploads, of course, are fun, not just because you can sometimes get PHP shells on the server that you can execute through other vulnerabilities, but also because sometimes the files you upload can trigger vulnerabilities in like ImageMagick, for example. There was a fun one with ImageMagick where it would execute code if you put it in the image in just the right way. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you're just looking for cross-site scripting attacks. If you put content into an input vector, does it show up on the page? Does it get stored in the database and then show up on the page? Can you bypass front-end validation to make that happen? Those are all fun things to take a look at. Once you have a general understanding of how the application is behaving, how the code is structured, how the input works, etc., you can get a feel for what the back-end technologies might be. So if you're seeing posts to a PHP page with ampersand separated parameters, or if you're seeing JSON blobs, the JSON blob might be deserialized. There could be JSON injection attacks, whereas the other one, you might want to focus on SQLi, right? You might find something in the SQL database where if it's JavaScript, it might be no SQL. And as you start to really put this stuff together, it really helps you later on when you're actually trying to attack the application. When you have an understanding of the Apache or Express, right, the versions of those systems, you can start checking for the different modules that are common. I went to a talk at Hope in New York City where the guy was saying he was auditing some malware and they left mod status enabled in Apache. And he was able to basically see all of the requests from all of the compromised devices going back to the CNC server. So knowing what kind of technology is available, not just because you can say, okay, it's Apache whatever that has this level 10 RCE and I can break in. You can get other pieces of information out of it as well. And of course, there's lots of different communication standards, and you kind of need to know that to form your requests. When you kind of have a general understanding of the technologies in use and the structure of the existing application, you can start making guesses. You can say, okay, what parts of this application are actually interesting to me, right? Here's the API endpoint for getting all of the products on the page. Can I use that to do SQLi and get a list of all of the users? This is how the login request works. Can I do something fun there? Right? Here's a weird arcane spot in the application that doesn't look quite right. Maybe if I fiddle with this parameter, something will happen. So once you have mapped out the attack surface, you can dig deeper and see if there's anything fun for you to find out. And as you find out more stuff and you elevate your privileges, you repeat the whole process, right? Oh, now I'm an admin. What can I see now? And you can go from there. Maybe something that you find in the front end gives you admin, gives you shell, gives you domain admin inside of an IIS server. Like you can elevate one step at a time. The tool that we're going to be using to play with this successfully, God willing, is Burp Suite. And I like doing live demos because it's an adrenaline rush. So we'll see how that goes. But the tools that we're going to be using inside of Burp Suite, we're going to be using the sitemap functionality that it generates for us. We're not really going to be using an automated spider. Does anybody know why I might not want to use an automated spider?
Brings attention to it.
Noise.
Attention, noise. Any other guesses?
Considered as an attack.
It can be considered as an attack. There's ways, by the way, to mitigate that. You can throttle your automated scanners. But the main reason that I don't want to use a spider, an automated spider, is because it doesn't usually find everything. There's lots of stuff it doesn't find. There's buttons it can't push. There's lots of JavaScript functionality that just doesn't get triggered by it. So we're going to be using user-directed spidering or passive spidering. The content that we find, we're going to send to the intruder and the repeater to modify it ever so slightly and see if we can find out more stuff. If we find weird encodings, we're going to send it to the decoder and see what we can pull out of it. And the compare, the sequencer, I'm not going to play with it too much unless we have time and we run out of other interesting things to look at. But they allow you to say, okay, how are these two pages different? How are these two response bodies different? Is the sequence of tokens predictable? Can I guess the next forgot password token is going to be emailed and then generated for somebody else's account and access it? A bit more advanced than just using repeaters and intruders, but we'll see. Here we go. So this is the juice shop. And we're going to start from the beginning. So I have this silly little shell script that doesn't want to execute. There we go. And all it is a Docker container that I run with sudo. It just basically stops all the existing Docker containers and then runs this image that you can find on Docker Hub yourself. I'm going to make sure I'm giving you my credentials. Okay. So that'll start. And then we're going to turn on Burp. Now I have the professional version of Burp, which gosh, you can't see that. I have to remember this. That works. So I have the professional version of Burp, which helps for a couple of things, primarily the speed of some of the content discovery tools that we'll be using. But I'm just going to create a temporary project so that we can get a fresh start. and see what everything ends up looking like. The first step is just turn off the interceptor because it just complicates things. We have the scope tab. So for this, we're going to lock the scope to localhost on port 3000. Yes, I want to exclude all of the content that isn't localhost on port 3000. So I've got my proxy running here on port 8080. So I can go to my Preferences tab, activate my proxy. And now we are on the Burp page, so delete cookie, so we can, I have to restart the application, it says. Okay, that's fine. Do that again. There we go. Slow and steady. We've got plenty of time. Let it load. Here we go, local 3000. Refresh. So this is the OWASP juice shop, and you still can't really see it, so I'm going to try this again. Up there. Okay, we don't need this for now. It has a list of products that are kind of interesting. Apple juice, that kind of stuff. Ignore the successfully solved challenges message. I was doing some preparation before. But just loading this page, if we go back to Burp Suite, we can see that the sitemap starts to populate. So we go back to our target here and go to sitemap. We see localhost. So localhost starts to fill itself in. So I can make that a little bit bigger there. Cool. So immediately, what are some of the interesting things that we see here? Well, you can kind of see we've got an API folder, Node modules, right? So we're working with Node in the back end, that's our technologies. We have private and public folders. We have this redirect, which is kind of weird, right? A REST folder. So this redirect folder looks like we can trigger external URLs. That in and of itself is a vulnerability, right? Because that lets users be like, okay, juiceshop.com, and then it redirects to like maliciousjuiceshop.com that like steals your credentials or whatever. That's kind of interesting. The API folder has this challenges directory. So we can see, can I make this bigger? So we can see the request structure down here. It has challenges, it has a parameter name, scoreboard, response headers, spits out JSON here. Try to find a reference or clue behind the scenes. Simply guess what the URL for the scoreboard might be. So it's teasing us. But let's see what else we can find. Let's go around the site for a little bit. Well, we have a contact us page. It's going to load down here. Got an author's us. I type in hi, right? I still can't click submit. It's disabled. I give it a rating. Submit's still disabled. 9 times 7 minus 3. Well, if I look at Burp Suite, is there anything that might give me information about that CAPTCHA? See, REST, CAPTCHA. Oh, it even tells me the answer there. Okay, 60. Copy that. Paste. Who wants to do math? There we go. So 1 minus 10 plus 5, that's going to be 14. Just fill that right in. Cats. So I still can't click submit unless I click this rating button, but I don't want this rating button. Oh, I can disable it and my submit button still works. Oh, my capture's bad. Why? 4? It's 4. Okay. Well, we could ask the API, right? But yeah, I mean, this is an example of like broken functionality. So we say -4.
Yep.
-4. Take that rating away. Yeah.
Just comment.
Yeah. So, okay, so there's the contact us page. We can maybe explore that a little bit more. Right now, we're not trying to exploit it. We're just trying to see what's there. So that generated a few requests. Let's go to the About Us page. Well, we've got some text. We've got some images. I wonder if any of these are the comment that I just left. Yeah, there's my comment. So there might be an opportunity for cross-site scripting there. Play with that a little bit later. So we've got a link. Oh, this link. Right, you can't see the URL at the bottom left corner there. Yeah, so this link says FTP legal.md_debug equals true. So debug parameters are always interesting, but just downloads the file directly. Well, that could be useful later on. So as we click through this, we start to get a general understanding of what could be there. So I've started to put this together for us in this program, KeepNote. So these are some of the unauthenticated pages that we can access. This allows you to kind of collect the information. You can say, okay, it takes in these parameters, etc. You can start to build a map for yourself for later reference. This is a very useful program that I like a lot. But there's still more good stuff inside of Burp here. So okay, we've got a couple of pages, admin, rest, CAPTCHA. Let's see what else we can find. So if we have this page here and we send it to the intruder, this request has a couple of structures. It's got rest and this. So I make this a parameter. Well, let's clear out all of the other ones. Let's make this one a parameter. And let's go to the payloads tab here. So that parameter that I made is number 1. I can make a list from all of these pre-populated things in Burp. So here's a list of short words. I can just start the attack. So it's going to go and it's going to say, okay, what can I find? Right? This is a big long list though. So in order to really make heads or tails out of it, a good practice is to sort by length. So what you'll see is that some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. And you could dig into that more with the comparer. But as this runs, it is going to find something eventually. We'll let that run. You can do similar to the other pages in your sitemap, for example, the API. But let's just try some basic attacks, and let's see what we can find out in the process. I mean, we have some more stuff going on with just clicking stuff, populating the sitemap. Come back to it later. Let's try and log in. So, login form here. I wonder if it's going to, yeah. So, can't just log in with any old thing. What if we tried basic SQL injection? Okay, so we have just whatever email or true. So true is just 1 equals 1. We can comment at the end. What do we get? It worked. So I can log in using SQL injection. Let's see, you can't really see who I am right now. But I can see that we have some additional functionality. Now we have my basket. I can change my password. I can complain. That's always fun. I like to do that. I can track my orders, recycle, whatever. Just clicking on stuff, filling in the map. But I can also create a user account for myself. More functionality for us to analyze. Not yet a customer. So let's just say my super secure password is my email address. My father's birthday is also my email address. And now I can log in. Cool. So now I have an account that I own. I also have an admin account that I can play around with. The account that I own, let's see, if I search for cats, nothing comes up, but it does show up in Burp, I believe, under search, REST, API, where is it? API. Here we go. Let's turn on the proxies interceptor that I don't necessarily like to start with, but that can sometimes be interesting. So this allows us to target specific requests and see what we come up with. If it's actually going to trigger the request. There we go. So now I have this query parameter, search. So maybe I can try and do some more SQL injection. Maybe I can try and do some cross-site scripting. I don't know, just to get started, let's see if I can change the parameter here to be like, say again? Alert one, yeah, exactly. I was kind of thinking more like alert cats, though. And so, we got an interesting error coming out of this one. So this kind of gives us information about our database, right? SQLite database. We have some path information on the server, and some information about some select statements. But if we were to do that in the browser, do we get a different result? How many typos do we have? Hey, cool. So we can do reflected. This is a reflected cross-site scripting attack, as opposed to a persisted cross-site scripting attack. So this means that if I send you a URL, hey, do this, run this search on Juice Shop for me. Okay, cool, great, I got your credits. Thanks. Lots of browsers will stop this. Right? They'll say, oh, your request contained this value that's being echoed out onto the page, so I'm not going to execute it. Persisted XSS browsers have a little bit more trouble with. But that kind of gives us a general overview of the application. Right? So we have a really good place to start in terms of analyzing what we have to play with. So we have these GET requests to an API that we can explore a little bit deeper. So we could send these to the intruder and run some script, a script on them to try and guess other possible endpoints. We have these product endpoints. Let's see. Oh, something I didn't click on that I wanted to show you guys. Can you map the home page here without XSS? It's not products. Very good. I appear to have caused it issues. Just get rid of the search parameter. Give me stuff. Nope, whatever, I'll have to restart the application. This is one of the reasons why you don't want to test applications you don't own. Because you might accidentally break something and not be able to recover from it gracefully. You don't necessarily want to break stuff. Well, that's a bummer. Anyways, there's some more interesting stuff inside of the products endpoint that I can't show you guys right now. Users 9. So sometimes you can do injection in URL parameters that don't look like URL parameters. I don't know if this one's actually going to work for us. But let's find out. So you can just poke around with stuff. This is really, I don't know. This is get API users 1. Can I see other users? Unauthorized. No authorization headers. So maybe if I played around with the authorization headers, you can start to see some error messages that can give you information about the rest of the application. That's pretty much the overview here. There's lots of fun stuff that you can dig in with this application if you want to. There's this entire guide called Honing Juice Shop, right? So it's 200 pages, and it walks you through all of the different parts of the juice shop that you can explore. It allows you to it gives you hints initially, and then after you dig in deeper, it actually even tells you how to solve all of the challenges. So that's pretty much it. I've still got about 5 or 10 minutes for questions. That's it. So I'm going to open it up to you guys. Anybody have any questions? Did the intruder finish? It did finish, and it found basket. So basket has a different content length than the rest of the stuff. It's yelling about no authorization header as opposed to the rest of the stuff that's yelling about unexpected paths. So that tells us that we have found something interesting there. Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to show you guys. If we go to the target and we just want to say, okay, Burp, try and do some stuff for us, right? There's this cool Discover Content button. And if you just start it, and granted, Burp is, I'm sorry, the juice shop is a little broken right now. But it's just gonna dig in. And this is where it finds things like the disabled form fields and the comments and stuff that could be URLs, and it helps populate your sitemap even further. So
Is it only in the professional edition?
I think the Content Discoverer is only in the professional edition, yes. So, yeah, just wanted to show you that. The intruder finished. Any other questions? Yes?
Even though there is some sort of authorization on this, I'm guessing because of the older vulnerabilities, you can just pop right over that.
So there is an authorization header. Let's see. Can we find it? So if we were to go OWASP juice shop here and log in, what do we actually, oh, I think I still have my interceptor on. Turn that off. Log in with my super secure username and password. Turn the, hold on, log out. Log in. Now before I hit the button, let's turn the interceptor back on. Press the intercept on. Log in. Forward. So there's my EU username and password. Send the repeater. Execute it. What do we get back? We get an authentication token. So looking at this authentication token, anybody have any guesses what kind of token this may be? JWT? Let's find out. If I copy this token and I go to jwt.io, I'm going to have to turn my proxy off for a second. Now, I'm sure that there's easier ways of doing this, but it's just the way that I can think of off the top of my head. Hope it loads. Oh yeah, it's loading. So I can scroll down here, I can paste it. Yeah, shows right up. So it's JSON Web Tokens. Now, some of the interesting things about JSON Web Tokens is some of the older versions of that the JWT library used hashing algorithms that are insecure. So you might be able to forge your own JSON web tokens. That could be something fun to play with. But yeah, you can drop this in an authorization header and maybe find more content on the website, especially if you use that admin account that WeSQL injected into. You had a question.
Oh, well, I was wondering if, I read lots of, how-to guides and stuff, but if there was a guide that really showed us how to do the process of web application hacking, like, are we supposed to get like a test dummy account? Are we supposed to test on live systems? And how do we recover, because it seems like you can't really test on test systems.
So let me give you this answer from the perspective of somebody who contracts penetration testers. The goal that I prescribe to them, right? Here is my server. I don't think you're going to be able to break it. Here's a staging environment. Here's a local copy of the code. Tell me what you can find. And they do this, right? They go through, they map it, they find all of the endpoints that they can. I give them as much information as I can about the website to save them time, because I don't want them to have to do a black box test. I want them to know what's there and what could be vulnerable and give me the answers so they can find stuff I missed. But if you're trying to do a black box test, or you find content that I didn't describe to you appropriately, you will have to map out the inputs that it takes. You'll have to delete some inputs, put them, change them. Check out the Web Application Hacker's Handbook. It is hundreds and hundreds of pages long, and it goes very much in depth with hack steps for each of the different categories of vulnerabilities. Chapter 4 alone has like 15 different sections. Each one has a list of like 10 steps that you can follow to hack, along with like example pages that you can try it on against.
Yeah, so I have the book. It took me a long time to read it. So you don't really give, people are not really testing on live systems for you. They're testing on, you're just giving them code and maybe some.
So I tend to give them a Docker container. But yeah, if they want to verify a vulnerability exists in production, I also give them production accounts. I also give them staging accounts, so they have a slightly less sensitive environment to test some stuff against. But it also comes down to like, if you're going to do an SQL injection, right? And you're going to do like blind SQL injection, for example, and you have a time command, maybe wait for 2 seconds, don't wait for an hour, right? Maybe don't try and drop the database. There's different ways of testing the application that can reveal a potential vulnerability without actually taking the server down. And sometimes you take the server down on accident. When you get a phone call and you're like, oh, did you just do that? And it's like, well, yeah, sorry. And then you have to start everything back up, which is never a good situation. So if you have a production environment that you're afraid might be vulnerable, warn your testers. Be careful if you are a tester that you don't inject stuff that can take down a server. It's easier said than done. Mistakes happen. But in general, you want a safe environment that you can throw whatever you want against to see what's there. So at the end, you have to then catalog it, because you don't want to just find the vulns. You want to be able to say, okay, this is why it happened. This is how you can fix it. And then you have to type it up in a report. So that's another step. Good question. Any other questions? Any other comments, feedback? What do you guys think? Was this boring?
No.
Great.
Cool. You enjoyed it?
Yes.
Awesome. I had a lot of fun.